Actually, not so much trig. Hold on a second. Let me just take a gander at these. Okay, so the first 6 are all 45, 45, and the next 6 are all 30, 60. Okay, those are your two special triangles. Now, let's talk about what that means. We'll start with the 45, 45. It's a right triangle for one thing. And we know it's 45, 45 because they've given us that side's equal to that side, which makes it isosceles, so those two angles are also equal to one another. Now, when I talk about these, I like my students to memorize the unit dimensions like this. Okay?
Okay.
And the reason is, let's say that I have a bigger 45, 45 right triangle, and this side was 3, whoops, it's supposed to be a 3, what would this be?
3 root of 2.
Yeah. In other words, if that side was 3, then the scale factor, the linear scale factor, is 3 to 1. So every other side is 3 to 1. That would have to be 3 root 2, and this would have to be 3 times 1. So that's why it's really useful to memorize the relationships here. In other words, what we care about are those 3 dimensions. So kind of memorize that. Now, up here, they're telling us that G is 6 root 3. What's the scale factor between this triangle and the one I have circled on the right? How do you get the scale factor? You divide the bigger one by the smaller one. That's the smaller one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the scale factor. Now, I want to rationalize that, right? You know what rationalization means? How do I rationalize that answer? In other words, I don't like having irrational denominators. So how do I turn an irrational denominator into a rational one?
Do you times both sides by root 2?
Not both sides, but top and bottom. In other words, what I'm doing when I multiply it by this is multiplying it by the number 1. Well, you can multiply any fraction by the number 1 without changing its value. And now that becomes 6 root 6 and 2, which becomes 3 root 6. So this side is 3 root 6, and this side is the same thing, so it has to be 3 root 6 also. That's if G were 6 root 3. Now it's just accidental that those are reversed, I think. I'm not positive, but that's not, maybe there's some rule that All right, so that's the way we're going to do every problem, is we're going to find out what the scale factor is, and then we're going to apply it everywhere. So let me put that back up there. 1 root 2. Now notice I could also just as easily, if I wanted to, say that this is root 2 to root 2. That's also a 45/45. And sometimes they'll use this merely because it's a little more convenient when you are doing trig. But even in trig, I don't like that. In fact, I detest it. I think that there's a lot to learn from the concept of a unit triangle. And the reason I call it a unit is because the side opposite the smallest angle is 1. Once you get that, once you know that's 1, well then this has to be 1. And once you know both of those are 1, this has to be square root of 2. So you don't even have to memorize any of the numbers. You just have to know how to figure them out. Okay? So for number 2, what is our scale factor? That is always the first thing.
1 root 2.
No? Remember, you take the bigger and you divide by the same side. In this case, they're giving us h, that right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so this side is 3 root 2. So we get the scale factor by taking the bigger, 3 root 2, and dividing it by the smaller, 1. So the scale factor is just 3 root 2. Okay? So what does that make this bottom side?
3 root 2.
And what does it make that side there?
Well, you have to
What do we have to
times it by root 2.
correct? So what do you get?
3 root 4.
Which is
3
3 times 2,
okay, yeah, 3 times, yeah.
which is
So it equals,
now, let's stop there for a second. I don't like the way you did this. You don't need to go root 4 and then solve that. Okay? When you have the square root of x times the square root of x, it's always equal to x, no matter what x is. Square root of 7 times square root of 7 is 7. So square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. Go directly to there. Do not pass go. Okay, let's see. We got one more of these 45. This time I'm going to memorize the special triangle. I'm going to take it off the screen. Now do 3. And this side is 9.
H will be 9 as well. And then, you do 9 multiplied by root 2, which equals 9 root 2.
And that's the answer you want to give. You don't want to convert these to decimals ever.
Don't you simplify the 9 though?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Can't simplify the 9. And you certainly can't simplify the root 2. That's a prime number. So
Okay.
there's no way I can take anything out of there. If that 9 were inside the radical sign, then I could turn it into a 3. But it's not. Okay, so let me scroll down. to at least one more of those, and yeah, I know we're gonna have time to do them all. You get this. So f is root 7. Whoops, hold on. There's nothing like just practice, just drilling. Okay, so what's first step?
H would be multiplied by 1, so it'd be root 7.
Let's figure out the scale factor. It's root 7 divided by 1, right?
Yeah.
Let's always figure out the scale factor as the first step. And I always put the bigger number over the smaller number. If it's a triangle that's smaller than my unit triangle, then I would put the unit triangle over the smaller one. But, all right, now, so what's G?
Root 7 multiplied by root 2.
Which is?
Is it root 14?
Uh-huh. And again, we know we're not going to be able to simplify that because it was the result of two prime numbers. So there aren't going to be any other factors of 14 other than those two that we had. And so there's no way to pull a whole number out of there. Like, it's not divisible by 4 and it's not divisible by 9. And that's what you would need. Okay, number 5. First step.
So you would divide by root 2?
Yes. So what's the scale factor?
I don't get what you're asking when you want the scale factor.
It's the proportion of one triangle's corresponding side to the unit triangle's corresponding side. In other words, my unit triangle is 1, 1, root 2. Okay? So if I give you a triangle that is root 7, the scale factor is this side, which is the left side of the right triangle, divided by that side, which is 1. So the scale factor is root 7. In this case, they're giving us a G of 12. Okay, there's 12. Now, to get the scale factor is going to be 12 divided by root 2. And then, of course, we're going to have to rationalize that. That becomes 12 root 2 divided by 2, which becomes 6 root 2. There is our scale factor. And now we know exactly how big to make the other sides. We take our scale factor and we multiply it by the side of our unit triangle. So what's H?
H would be 6 root 2.
Okay. And the same with F. Okay. Now, number 6. Scale factor.
It would be root 5 multiplied by root 2.
No, it's just root 5 divided by the by the 1. In other words, remember our unit triangle is a 1, 1, root 2. And they've given us this side here. That's not, you mistakenly thought they gave us the hypotenuse. And then the scale factor would be root 5 divided by root 2. And that's why it may seem unnecessary to talk about this scale factor in this situation, but you're going to see that it becomes more and more vital, especially when we start talking about these 30-60 triangles. Okay, because there are not so many ones in them. But trust me, your first step you want to always do in these is get your scale factor. Okay? So if I put the unit one on there, it's 1 root 2. So you're going to divide h by 1. That's the scale factor. So it's just root 5. Now, what's f?
Root 5 also.
Now what's g?
Root 5 times root 2, which equals root 10.
Okay, you got it. All right, now let's talk about the second special triangle. And this is the 30-60 right triangle. And again, I call this the unit because the side opposite the smallest angle is 1. This time, this side is root 3, and the hypotenuse is 2. So now when you go to figure out scale factors, you're not always dividing by just 1 or multiplying by 1. Okay? In other words, let's do this first one. T is 4. Tell me what the scale factor is.
4 by 1.
Scale factor is 4. You don't need the 1. Just the scale factor. In other words, what this scale factor says is that every side on this triangle is 4 times bigger than my unit triangle. That's what the scale factor is. Okay? Now, so T is 4. Tell me what S is.
Would it be 4 times root 3?
And tell me what U is.
4 times 2, which equals 8.
Number 8. This time they're giving us the hypotenuse. What is the scale factor?
2 root 3.
Divided by? Remember, the scale factor is always one number divided by another one. It's definitely, that's the numerator. In other words, that's the bigger triangle. What's the same side of the unit triangle?
2 by 2.
Just 2.
Divided by 2.
Just 2.
Okay.
In other words, it's that divided by that.
Yeah.
Okay, now the 2's cancel, so the scale factor is root 3. And this is where you're going to find out why the scale factor is so important. It just is. So, tell me what side T is.
Would you
Take
divide
the
it
scale factor and multiply by the unit side.
Would it just be 2 root 3?
What's the scale factor?
2 root 3 divided by 2.
Simplify that. That's not 2 root 3 divided by 2. That's root 3.
Okay.
Okay? So the scale factor is root 3. So take root 3, multiply it by 1. That's what that side is.
Okay.
Now, what is the bottom side? You got to take your scale factor and multiply it by that.
Root 3 multiplied by root 3.
Which is?
Root 9.
Again, don't do it that way.
Oh, it'd just be did you say it'd be 3?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Root x times root x is x. In this case, the x is a 3, but it wouldn't matter what it was. Any the root of any number multiplied by the root of the same number is that number. Okay? So we've solved the triangle. And the complicated part here was the final step where we had to multiply root 3 times a root 3. Okay? Now, let me erase everything, including I'm going to erase the 3060, so memorize these dimensions. These are a little harder to memorize. You know the side opposite the 30 is definitely a 1. So the ones to memorize is this root 3 and the 2. Okay? So, one more, 9. At least one more in our picture here.
So the scale factor would be 10 divided by 2.
Huh? Which is 5. So the scale factor is 5. Okay.
Which means
what's t?
T would equal 5.
Correct. And s?
S would be 5 multiplied by root 3, which equals 5 root 3.
You got it. Okay, so 3 more 3060s. And again, I'm not going to put the triangle that I want you to memorize on there, the unit one. But it's the key. As long as you can remember the unit triangle's dimensions and you can remember the method, then you're always going to be able to solve these. And these are so important, Lachlan. When you take your test, your SAT and your ACT test, there are tons of these 3060 and 4545 triangles on there. So it's an important skill all the way through math. So S is 6. Tell me everything.
You do 6 multiplied by 2,
Hold on. Remember, first step is scale factor. And it's never multiplication. It's always division.
So would it be...
This is the bigger triangle than my unit. So it's 6 divided by, what was the bottom side of the unit triangle?
Root 3.
Okay. Now we got to rationalize that. Rationalize it.
Multiply both sides by root 3, and that gets you 6 root 3 over 3. And then divide the 6 and the 3, and that gets you 2 root 3.
Okay, so that's our scale factor right there. Now, tell me what t is.
Would it be 2 root 3?
Mm-hmm. We're going to take our scale factor and multiply it by the dimensions of the unit one, which were 1. Okay, and now tell me what u is.
Would it be 12?
No, what is the hypotenuse of our unit 3060 triangle? It's 1 root 3, 2.
So I thought you could...
So you got to multiply your scale factor times
okay, alright. So would it be 4 root 6?
4 root 3. Because all you're doing is multiplying the scale factor times the number 2. And when you do that, you're only multiplying that, which is 4 root 3.
Okay.
Okay, in other words, you don't multiply it by both. When I have A times B times C, I can do it in whatever order I want. I can multiply A times C first, and then I take that result and multiply it by B. but I don't multiply C times B and also by A and add them all together. Okay, so, okay, 11, or what did we just do?
We just did 10.
We just did 10. Okay, so 11.
So T would be root 5, which means the scale factor would be root 5.
Correct, because it's divided by 1. Okay.
And then you'll do root 5 multiplied by root 3,
Which is?
root 15, which equals S.
And that cannot be simplified. There are no factors of root of 15 that are perfect square numbers. And then what's U?
And then you'll do root 5 multiplied by 2, and that gets
And
2 root.
yeah, you want to put the whole number in front like that. You don't want to write it like this, and the primary reason is it's too often misinterpreted as the 2 being under the radical sign. So avoid writing it afterwards. Always put the whole real number in front of the radical sign. Okay, finally 12.
So it'd be root 2 multiplied by root 3.
Okay, hold on. What are you talking about, first of all? In other words, always start out with those words, because I didn't know what you meant.
Okay.
You started out by saying root 2 multiplied by root 3. I didn't know what you were talking about.
All right.
So always remember the first step is figuring out that scale factor. That's critical.
Okay.
Scale factor is always a ratio. It is always something divided by something else. So there's no multiplication yet. Once you get the scale factor, then there's lots of multiplication. But to come up with the scale factor is a division problem.
Okay.
So what is it?
Scale factor root 2. Would it be multiplied by root 3?
It's always a ratio. Always. You don't get ratios when you multiply. You get ratios when you divide.
Okay.
In other words, when I'm comparing this triangle with my little triangle, I need to divide. And what's the equivalent side on the little triangle?
Root 3.
Correct. Now, notice something. This is not the bigger triangle. That's the littler triangle. Root 2 is about 1.4. Root 3 is about 1.7. So I've got it backwards, but guess what? It doesn't matter. You don't need a scale factor that's necessarily greater than 1. Because all you need is a scale factor. Okay, now let's rationalize that. Because we've got an irrational denominator. Let's leave it little to big. That's fine. I want to show you why you can do that.
So it equals root 6 over 3.
Correct. Okay. Now, that's, let's see, S was root 2. Our scale factor is that. So what is T?
T would be root 6 divided by 3. Oh, no, it would be root 6 over 3.
And what is U?
It would be, would it be root 6 over 6?
Now this is where you do the multiplication. In other words, once you have your scale factor, the rest of the problem is all multiplication. You took your scale factor, you multiplied it by 1 to get that. You took your scale factor and you're going to multiply it by 2 to get that. Because 2 is the hypotenuse on our unit triangle. So when I multiply this scale factor by 2, I get this. That is 2 times the scale factor. Multiplying the numerator by 2 is all. Okay? Now, if we examine this, we will notice that that side is also less than 1, as it should be. We've decided it's the smaller triangle. So if that's not less than 1, we've made a mistake. Well, I know it is because square root of 6 is less than 3. Okay? So that side checks out. And now how about that side? Is that less than the number 2? Well, yeah, it is. Obviously, if that is a number less than 1, then 2 times that number is less than 2. So that checks out. So by using the exact same method, we did not need to know which was the bigger or which was the smaller triangle. All we needed was a scale factor. It does not have to be greater than 1. It can be less than 1. In this case, it was less than 1. In other words, if I give you a triangle like that and I say that's 1/2, well, this triangle is clearly smaller than our unit triangle. Doesn't matter. The scale factor is 1/2. So I'm going to multiply everything by 1/2. That becomes that. That becomes that. So don't worry about which is the bigger and which is the smaller. It's not critical. Not only is it not critical, it's irrelevant. So what do we got? We got more?
No.
No?
That's it.
That's it? Well, I feel like you get this pretty good. Do you think you do?
Yeah, I think I do. I just think sometimes I can overthink the scale factor.
Well, the scale factor is the key starting spot on all of it. And just remember 2 things. The scale factor is a division problem. Always. It's one triangle's common side divided by the other triangle's common side. The denominator is always my unit triangle. The numerator is always the triangle you're looking at. So scale factor, the only mistake I saw you kept making was thinking that it was multiplication, something times something. It is never multiplication. It is always division.
Okay.
Okay, and then figuring out the other 2 sides, once you have the scale factor, that's always multiplication. That's always taking the scale factor and multiplying the unit triangle side to come up with the side of the triangle you're looking at.
Okay.
All right, Lachlan. I will let you go and talk to you next time.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.